Barley Firstfruit. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian and biblical perspective. This is a warning, but it is not a prediction. I do not know the future, but I can show you the patterns and shadows that are playing out before us right now. Romans 8:23 says, "For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruit of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body." As Christians, we are called the first fruit of Christ, and we are waiting for the redemption of our body, and we are told that we are sealed unto the day of redemption. We were bought and paid for by Christ, and now we are just waiting for Him to pick up and to redeem what He has paid for. When we look at the current Jewish calendar and where we are right now, we're on day 19. Still within the Passover week, as the events are called. There's still 2 more days to go, and there's still very significant signs and patterns to come. And we just talked in our last video about how we are now in the period just past the road to Emmaus, where we are waiting for the prophetic shadow of Christ to reveal Himself, the Son of Man to reveal Himself to His disciples again. And so we are still in a high watch area, and we're going to look at more today of how our attention has been drawn to this prophetic season, this time of year, and why our expectation should be at this season, at these spring feasts, and not necessarily others. Again, we find ourselves on day 19, which is in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this feast is 7 days long and is marked by a gathering on the first day, a convocation, but then also on the last day, there's also a holy convocation, a gathering of the people. Leviticus 23, in the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. And the 7th day is an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts with a convocation, a gathering and assembly of the people, but then it also ends with a holy convocation and a gathering of the people again. Numbers chapter 10 tells us that the people were gathered and assembled whenever they did congregate by the trumpets. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And if they blow but with 1 trumpet, then the princes, which are heads of the thousands of Israel, shall gather themselves unto thee. When ye blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east parts shall go forward. When ye blow an alarm the 2nd time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, ye shall blow, but ye shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. And if ye go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginning of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. So these trumpets are blown for a multitude of different reasons, but many times for gathering the people together, and used on the solemn days. And there's many different historical references to these silver trumpets that they had for calling the people together. And that is what we're listening for, is we're listening for the last trump. We've heard many prophetic calls and the trumpet calls even way back in the fall, alerting us that times are changing. Sudden destruction is coming. Our attention was alerted to very major celestial signs. We've heard multiple trumpets telling us to get ready, that we are about to break camp. What we are waiting for now is the trumpet call to assemble and the gathering of the Messiah's people unto Himself. That is the shadow and pattern that we're waiting for. So we still find this whole time that we are at right now, and even the days ahead, very rich with shadows and patterns. We do not know the day or hour, but we know the patterns and types. And we know the past of what has been happening with all the signs, so we know we are at a very important time, and we must be sober, and we must be vigilant, and we must watch. And most importantly, we must be ready. This time period of the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is very important because it's associated with spring and barley and the figs putting forth blooms. And we talked about all that before, and even in the Song of Solomon, it heavily intimates the idea of a spring gathering of the Messiah's people. This time of year is also when the Bible remarks that Ruth came to the land of Israel during the time of the barley harvest, which is another beautiful picture of redemption and a bride. And if you notice and studied the genealogies, whenever Scripture mentions a woman in a genealogy, it's drawing attention to that because that's not normally done. And Christ has some very important women in his genealogy, Ruth and Rahab, and they're very important to this time period. You know, the Israelites crossed the Jordan at the triumphal entry that exact same date, and they camped just really outside Jericho. And now we find out about Ruth being at the same time. They're here, and their stories are recorded for a reason. Just like we've been studying Ruth, there's a lot of pictures of redemption and the bride. Now in about 40 days is going to be the commemoration of Christ's ascension to glory. And that's very close to Pentecost, 10 days away. But that signals when Christ was leaving, and we are looking for the signs of his coming, which is at the time of Passover. And so that is one reason why we look at this time and not necessarily later. What we know as Pentecost is really the Feast of Weeks, and it's about the first fruits. And one thing we have to keep in mind is we need to look at what Scripture equates with the different feasts and festivals, because that is what the pattern and shadow is that we go by, not necessarily tradition, although we do consider that, and that does play into the ideas that come to people's minds, particularly even the Jewish minds, that were long established traditions and associations and ideas that attach to them. So we do have to consider them, but at the root we need to examine what is the biblical association with a particular feast. And the Feast of Weeks, what we call Pentecost, was commemorating the first fruits. And that's when the different farmers and the people brought together the different first fruits of their different crops, not necessarily one particular crop, but their different first fruits, and they brought it to the temple. But you'll notice there's a big gap between Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Pentecost. There's a big gap. And what we're going to find out today is that these are pointing to two different harvests. Even technically, the barley harvest starts right during the Passover week. It's the first thing to ripen, and the Bible even makes mention of the first fruits, and it's referencing the barley firstfruits, because that's the only thing ripening at this time. It's the only thing harvested at this time. And the barley harvest is going to continue for a number of days, and about to the middle, and sometimes the end of April, depending on the region you are at in Israel and the soil and everything. But the barley harvest starts way earlier than the other harvest, especially the wheat harvest. The wheat harvest will usually start around the beginning of May or the middle of May. It's typically 50 days after the barley harvest starts. There's a wide degree of separation between these two harvests. But what you'll see is the barley harvest is associated with the Passover week, but the wheat harvest is associated with Pentecost. And we've looked at the Song of Solomon, talking about referencing to winter and the spring being here now, and making mention of the earth changes that are going on in nature, and a strong association to the bride being called away at springtime. And this is the time of the barley harvest, and this is when Ruth arrived in the land as well. And the barley harvest officially starts around the time of first fruits, because that's what they are offering, is the first fruits of the barley harvest, symbolically. The Bible makes mention you cannot eat of this new harvest until you perform first fruits, because it happens at the same time. And this is one of the stipulations for keeping the calendar in sync with the harvest, because they go together. You can't just randomly add in leap months whenever you feel like it. But we've talked about barley before in our pattern videos, about how barley is different than wheat in that barley doesn't need to be threshed. You just need to winnow it. Just tossing it up into the air, the grain releases from the husk. It is so much easier processed. And this is a reference to the Christians who have an ear to hear what their Lord wants and make the changes easily in their life that He wants, so that we are pleasing to Him. And this is also the same intimation in the letters to the 7 churches. Every single letter ends with, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches." Christ is looking for who is easily winnowed by the Spirit, who easily changes their heart and desires to be like Christ, who is making themselves ready and ripe for a barley harvest. So we find these two different harvests. Barley is associated with the Passover and the first fruits at the Passover week. is barley. That's what's harvested now. And right now we find ourselves already technically in the barley harvest. We saw the pictures before talking about barley. Barley's being harvested right now in Israel. This is the time of the barley harvest. This is what the first month is associated with. The barley harvest happens here at spring, not later toward the wheat harvest. That's a completely separate emphasis and a separate focus. Pentecost is associated with the wheat harvest, not the barley harvest. Leviticus 23, 9-11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow, after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Notice this association with the firstfruits is, he mentions, you are reaping the harvest at the same time you are offering the sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest. So the harvest is starting concurrently. So prophetically right now we find ourselves within the barley harvest, and that is the first fruit. That's the only first fruit being offered at the Passover week, because that's the only thing that's ready. That's the only first fruit at this time. The wheat is not even going to be ripe till another 50 days, almost 2 months. But it is interesting that the Bible associates Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, with wheat, not barley. Exodus 34:22. And thou shalt observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruit of wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the year's end. So he's telling them there's 2 different harvests. So the Bible is telling us that really another name for the Feast of Weeks, which is Pentecost, is really the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Now typically it'll start several days before Pentecost gets there, and it'll continue even past Pentecost. But this time is associated with the wheat harvest. Pentecost is. And so that's why the Bible refers to it as that is the time of the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And typically over time with tradition and whatnot, that is also the time when people would bring the first fruits of other things as well. And some barley they've set aside from their barley harvest and from their gardens and other things that are starting to come in as well. So the Feast of Weeks was associated over time with more than just the first fruits of wheat, but the Bible specifically makes mention that it is most associated with being the first fruits of wheat with Pentecost, while the Passover week is associated with barley. So this is one major reason why I associate and I think that the rapture is going to be, number one, a spring rapture, but it's going to be a barley harvest. And we've looked at those patterns already because that harvest has to take place first. And it would not make sense to have a barley type harvest during the wheat harvest. That would be messing and confusing patterns and shadows. So I highly expect the rapture to happen close to the spring, which is where we are now, but within the barley harvest season. And the barley harvest has already started. So we are already in a time of expectation. Some things we need to keep in mind just for the days ahead while we wait, because we do not know the day or hour. But we do see our options running out is this is a very significant month, being the first month of the year on the Jewish calendar when you don't consider the rabbinical random precepts. But the first month is very important because it's the head of the year. And we see that we are more than halfway through, so we are running out of time. And the barley harvest largely fits within this first month. But the first month of the spiritual year on the religious calendar has very significant names as well. And a lot of these came through tradition, but also with association with wording used in the scripture referring to this time. For example, this is referred to as the month of redemption, because of the strong association with the stories of Exodus happening during this time, and Passover, and the redemption money, the redemption of the firstborn, the token memorial, and that was also collected on the first day of the year too as well. So this month is known as the month of redemption. And what are we waiting for? What are we groaning for? We are groaning for the redemption of our bodies. As the redeemed possession of Christ, we are so eagerly looking forward to the day of redemption. So our highest expectation should then naturally be in the month of redemption. But this month is also referred to as the month of kings, which is very significant when we consider the King of Kings came in this month as well. But it has that name because the genealogies of their kings are counted according to the religious calendar, and they start at this month, not the 7th month, which is when the civil calendar starts. So this is called the month of kings because it starts the year and how they do the genealogies for the kings. But this month also has another very significant name. It's also referred to as the month of Judah. And we have been looking recently very much at Judah. But Judah, the son of Jacob, was functionally the firstborn of Jacob, Israel, because Reuben, Simeon, and Levi were disqualified because of actions on their part. So Judah was considered functionally the firstborn, so he is associated with the first month. So they call this the month of Judah. And what have we been studying so much? The sign in Jupiter, in Leo, the lion, Judah, going on during the month of redemption, the month of kings, awaiting the gathering of Shiloh, Messiah's people, when he's going to have a harvest, a congregation of his people, his barley, those who have made themselves ready. This is the time of our greatest expectation. Genesis 49, 9 through 11. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his asses colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. We've talked about this passage before, of the association with Judah, the lion, and Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. And Revelation 5 starts out with this, talking about the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, and how he prevailed, and he was the lamb, and he redeemed his people and gathered them. And this is what we are waiting so eagerly for during this time. This is our expectation, is that the lion of the tribe of Judah will gather his people, his barley, during this springtime where we are at right now. We do not know the day or hour, but we see time is running out, and our attention in various ways is being brought to time. So let us review, and like the road to Emmaus, let us consider and ponder everything that the Lord has shown us so far and brought us to this point with. And as we await the revealing of the Son of Man, let us make sure we are striving to be ready, and that we are striving to be Christ-like. Serve Christ first and highest above all else. Maranatha.